notification came at 6:47 in the morning. I remember the exact time because I'd set 3 alarms for 6:30 and somehow still woke up late. And I was standing in my kitchen in mismatched socks, waiting for my coffee to finish brewing, when my phone buzzed on the counter. A chase alert. I almost didn't open it. I figured it was just the auto pay for my gym membership, $22, same as every third of the month. It wasn't. Transaction declined. Available balance, $47.12. I stared at that number for a long time, long enough for my coffee to finish and go cold, long enough for the morning light to shift from gray to pale yellow through my kitchen window, $47.12. In an account that, the last time I'd actually looked, really looked, not just glanced, had a little over $41,000 sitting in it. That was my house fund. 3 years of double shifts at the hospital, skipped vacations, saying no to things I actually wanted, putting away every extra cent I had. I'm a registered nurse. I work nights. I pick up overtime when I can. I don't buy lattes or get my nails done professionally or do any of the things people joke about when they talk about why millennials can't afford homes. I saved like someone who understood that no one was coming to save me. $47.12. I put my coffee mug down very carefully. I sat down on my kitchen floor, which I'd been meaning to mop for 2 weeks, and I opened my banking app with hands that were steadier than I expected them to be. The transaction history loaded. I scrolled up, and up, and up. The withdrawals went back 14 months. Not one big withdrawal. That would have triggered an alert immediately, and I would have caught it. No, these were transfers, small and medium, ranging from $200 to $1,800 to $1,800, spaced out in irregular intervals so they never looked alarming at a glance. Some of them I recognized immediately. I'd authorized those. Transfer to checking. Rent supplement in October when my car needed repairs. Those were mine. But there were others. There were so many others. I got out a notepad. An actual paper notepad, because I needed to write this down with my hands, needed to feel it as something real and not just numbers on a screen. And I started a list. Date. Amount. Destination. I cross-referenced against my own records the spreadsheet I kept on my laptop, meticulous. Because I'm meticulous about money in a way I became after growing up in a house where money was always the thing we didn't talk about until we absolutely had to. By the time I finished, the morning was gone. It was almost noon. My coffee was still on the counter, untouched. $41,230. Gone. Let me tell you something about my family. We're close, or we were, or I thought we were, which I've since learned is not the same thing. My parents immigrated from the Philippines when my older brother was 2 years old. I was born here, in Sacramento, which made me the American one, the one who understood how things worked, the one everyone called when there was a form to fill out, or a phone call to make to someone official. I grew up being useful. I was good at it. I thought that was love. My brother is 4 years older than me. He married his college girlfriend, a woman I'll call my sister-in-law, when I was 24. The wedding was beautiful. I was a bridesmaid. I paid for my own dress, my own alterations, my own flight to Portland where the ceremony was held, my own hotel room for 3 nights. I did this without being asked, because it never occurred to me not to. That's the kind of daughter, the kind of sister I had spent my whole life trying to be. I have a joint account with my parents. Had a joint account. My parents had added me to it when I was 19 to help them manage bills. They weren't always confident navigating online banking, and it made sense at the time, practically speaking. What no one mentioned? What I never thought to think about until I'm sitting on my kitchen floor at 31 years old staring at $41,000 of missing money, was that a joint account works both ways. I could see their transactions, they could see mine, and with the right credentials, they could move money out of my savings the same way I could move money into their checking. I had set up a savings account linked to the same login, for convenience, because I trusted them the way you trust the ground beneath your feet, not because you've tested it, but because it has never once occurred to you that it could give way. The first transfer I couldn't account for was $800 in March of last year. To an account I didn't recognize, I called Chase, spoke to a representative named Marcus. I wrote his name down too, Habit, who confirmed the transfer had been initiated from a device associated with my parents' address. Not mine. Theirs. I sat with that information for a while. Then I called my mom. She picked up on the second ring, the way she always does, and said my name, the way she always says it, warm and familiar, and for 1 second, one genuinely terrible second, I thought about hanging up, about telling myself I'd misread the numbers, about finding a story that made this make sense in a way that didn't break anything. Instead, I said, "Mom, I need you to explain the transfers from my savings account." Silence. Not the silence of someone caught off guard. The silence of someone calculating. "Which transfers?" she said finally. That was when I knew. Because the right answer, the innocent answer, was what transfers, not which ones. I told her the total. I said the number out loud, slowly, because I needed to hear myself say it, and I needed her to hear it too. $41,000. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said very calmly, "That money was needed for the family. You have a good job. You can make it back." I think I stopped breathing for a moment. You can make it back. Like it was a bottle of shampoo she'd borrowed and forgotten to replace. Like I hadn't spent 3 years working night shifts and skipping holidays and putting away every dollar I could because I wanted, for the first time in my life, to have something that was only mine. "Mom," I said, "that was my house fund." "You don't need a house right now," she said. "You're not even married." I hung up. I didn't slam the phone. I just pressed the button, set it face down on the counter, and stood there in my kitchen for a long time, not thinking anything. When you get news that's too big, your brain does this thing where it refuses to process all of it at once. It gives it to you in pieces. The piece I got first was surprisingly practical. I need to change my account credentials. The piece I got second was grief, low and heavy, settling into my chest like something permanent. I spent the rest of that day pulling records. I went through everything. 14 months of transaction history, cross-referenced against text messages, against the Notes app on my phone where I kept track of anything family-related and money-related, because somewhere in the back of my mind I had always known, I think, that I needed to. The picture that emerged was thorough and specific and devastating. The $800 in March, a deposit toward my brother's new car. He'd wanted a specific trim level that was $800 more than what he'd budgeted, and apparently rather than asking me, or rather than my parents asking me directly, which would have required an explanation, they had simply solved the problem themselves. $1,200 in May, my sister-in-law's bridal shower for her sister. My parents had co-hosted, they hadn't told me. $3,500 in July and August in 3 separate transfers, a family trip to Maui. I was not invited. I was working. I remember texting my mom from the break room during a night shift that summer, and she'd sent back a picture of a sunset, and I had thought she was at my aunt's house in San Jose, and I had felt happy for her. The rest of it, groceries, utilities, what looked like partial rent payments, a new refrigerator, medical bills for my father's knee, gifts for relatives I'd never met, a deposit on a venue. That last one stopped me cold. A venue deposit, $4,000. Placed 8 months ago. I called my brother. He picked up, and I could hear his daughter in the background, my niece, 19 months old and chattering at something. I love that kid. I want to be clear about that, because it's important. I love my niece, and I love my brother in the complicated way you love someone who is also complicit in something that hurt you, which is its own specific kind of grief. I asked him about the venue deposit. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "It was for our vow renewal. We were going to invite you." "Were," I said, past tense. "We figured it out another way, with my money." Another silence. Then, "Mom said you knew." And there it is. That sentence. "Mom said you knew." And there it is. That sentence. "Mom said you knew." The thing that gets said in families like mine, in the specific architecture of how information moves and mutates between people who love each other, and also, sometimes, use each other. "Mom said you knew" is a complete system. It explains how my brother could look his wife in the eye while venues were booked on my savings account. It explains how my sister-in-law could plan a party, my parents could book a flight, my relatives could eat and drink and celebrate things I didn't know were happening, all while I worked night shifts and transferred my overtime into a savings account I thought was for my future. Mom said you knew. I didn't know. I had never known. What I did next, I did slowly and methodically, because I am not someone who does things in a rage. My mother calls this my cold side. My coworkers call it being professional. I call it having learned, somewhere in my childhood, that losing control of your emotions in front of people who have already decided you're overreacting only gives them more material. I called my bank. I explained the situation to a fraud specialist, a woman with a very even voice who did not judge me even once, and I will be grateful to her for the rest of my life. And she walked me through the process of flagging the unauthorized transfers, separating my savings account from the joint account entirely, and changing every credential associated with my profile. She told me the investigation would take time. She told me to document everything. I was already documenting everything. Then I opened my laptop. I went through every automatic payment, every subscription, every recurring transfer I had set up over the years that touched any account connected to my parents. My parents' phone plan. I've been paying $85 a month for 2 lines for 4 years. Cancelled. The streaming services I'd shared with the family account, cancelled. The Costco membership in my name that my mother used more than I did, cancelled. The $200 I transfer to my parents' checking every month for household expenses, a habit I'd started in nursing school and never questioned, cancelled. It took about 2 hours. When I was done, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not relief exactly. More like the feeling after you've had a fever for so long that you forgot what normal temperature felt like, and then suddenly you're on the other side of it, and everything is very quiet, and you realize how much energy you'd been spending just managing the heat. My father called that evening. He's quieter than my mother, more deliberate. He's the kind of man who thinks carefully before he speaks, which I've always respected about him, and which made it worse when he said, "You're hurting your mother." I said, "She hurt me first." He said, "That's not how family works." I said, "Dad, $41,000, and something happened on his end of the phone. I heard it, a shift, an intake of breath, and then a long pause, the kind of pause that means someone is working something out. My father is not a man who cries. In 31 years, I have seen him cry exactly twice, both times at funerals. But when he spoke again, his voice was different. Quieter, like something in it had been set down. "How long?" he said. 14 months, I said. "March of last year." Another pause. "She told me you'd agreed," he said, "to help with the family while you were saving. She told me you'd said yes." I hadn't said yes. I had never been asked. I heard my father do something I've only heard a handful of times. He raised his voice. Not at me. He turned away from the phone and I heard him, my quiet, careful, deliberate father, saying my mother's name in a way that meant this conversation was not over. I heard my mother's voice, defensive, rising. And then he came back to the phone and said, very carefully, "I didn't know. I want you to know that. I didn't know it was done without your permission." I believed him. That's the complicated part. I believed him, and it didn't fix anything, and I didn't know what to do with a grief that had no clean villain, only a system of assumptions and silence and a family that had decided, collectively and individually, that my financial future was a resource available to them as long as they didn't look at it too directly. "I need you to understand," I told him, "that I can't keep going the way we've been going. Not because I don't love you, but because I can't." He said he understood. I don't know if that's true. I think he was trying to. The next morning, I sent my brother a text. I told him I was not able to attend the vow renewal, if it was still happening. I told him I loved his daughter and that I would like to remain in her life, but that I needed time and space, and I needed him to understand that what had happened was not something I could fold back into normal. He didn't respond for 3 days. When he did, he said, "I'm sorry. I should have asked where the money was coming from. I didn't want to know." That one actually broke something in me because at least it was honest. I didn't want to know. How many things in families, in life, operate on exactly that logic? I didn't want to know. And so I didn't ask. And so it became someone else's problem to carry. The fraud investigation is ongoing. Chase has been thorough. My lawyer. Yes, I have a lawyer now. A woman I found through my coworker who told me approximately 3 minutes after I told her what happened that I needed a lawyer immediately. Tells me the case is complicated by the joint account structure, but not impossible. The nature of joint accounts in California means that transfers between account holders occupy a legal gray area, but the absence of my consent, documented through records, text messages, and my parents' own phone, changes the calculus considerably. I'm not doing it for the money, entirely. I mean, I am $41,000 is not nothing. It's 3 years of my life in overtime and self-denial. But that's not the whole reason. The reason is that there has to be a record. There has to be something that says, this happened, it was not okay, I did not agree, because the alternative is absorbing it, reclassifying it as family stuff and moving forward and not making waves, which is what I was trained to do, which is what daughters like me are so well trained to do that we do it almost before we know we're doing it. I am 31 years old. I work nights. I save money. I fill out forms and make phone calls and carry things for people, and I am very good at all of it. And somewhere in the last several weeks, I have been slowly and painfully learning that being good at taking care of people does not obligate me to be taken from. My mother called last week. She left a voicemail. She said she hoped I would come to Easter dinner. She said the family misses me. She said, and this is the part I've listened to 3 times trying to figure out what to do with it, you have to understand, we just needed help. You've always helped. We thought you knew that's what family does. And here's the thing I keep coming back to. The thing I turn over in my mind on night, drives home from the hospital when the roads are empty and the world is very quiet. She's not entirely wrong. That is what we taught each other family does. I watched my parents help their siblings, watched money leave our house in ways we couldn't afford, watched the cycle of obligation and expectation get handed down like a piece of furniture you inherit, whether you want it or not. I learned that love looks like self-sacrifice. I learned that boundaries are for other kinds of families, not ours. I learned it so well that when the money started disappearing, there was a part of my brain, small but real, that wondered if maybe I was supposed to have known. If maybe a better daughter would have anticipated the need and offered. That part of my brain is wrong. I know that now. I'm still learning how to stop listening to it. There's one more thing. After I'd finished canceling everything, after the phone calls to the bank and the lawyer, after the long, awful conversation with my father and the 3-day silence for my brother, I was cleaning out the drawer in my nightstand where I keep documents, because I needed my passport information for the lawyer, and I found something I'd forgotten was there. A folder. Green, cardboard, the kind you get at an office supply store. I put it there 2 years ago and never thought about it again. Inside was a printout of my savings account statement from when the balance first hit $10,000. I'd printed it and saved it, the way you might save a ticket stub from a concert that meant something to you. Below it was a note I'd written to myself in my own handwriting. This is yours. You made this. Keep going. I sat on my bedroom floor for a long time with that piece of paper. I'm going to build it back. The fund, the savings, the future I was making. It will take longer this time. I'm 31, not 28, and the market is different and the interest rates are different and everything is harder than it was. But the account is mine now, fully, only, legally mine. And the number in it, small as it currently is a number that belongs entirely to me. I kept the note. I put it back in the folder. I put the folder somewhere I'll see it. Keep going. I've thought a lot about what made all of this possible, not just the missing money, but the years before it, the conditions that had to exist for 14 months of transfers to go unnoticed, unchallenged, unspoken. And the honest answer is that I built those conditions myself. Not intentionally, not carelessly even. But I built them. I was the reliable one. The one who showed up, who figured things out, who never said this, is too much because I had decided, somewhere very early, that saying that was not something people like me did. Capable people carry things. Responsible people don't complain. Good daughters don't keep score, and so I didn't keep score, and because I didn't, other people kept it for me, quietly, in their favor, for 14 months. That's the part that took me the longest to sit with. Not the anger, which came easily and made sense, but the recognition that I had participated in my own erasure. Every time I transferred money without a word, every time I absorbed a cost no one asked me about, every time I told myself it's fine, they need it more than I do. I was teaching the people around me that my needs were negotiable, that my future was a resource available for community use, that I would not object because I never had. Consequences are rarely dramatic. They don't announce themselves. They accumulate in small increments, the way debt does, the way trust does, the way $41,000 disappears. Not all at once, but in transfers of $800 and $1,200 and $3,500, spaced out carefully enough that no single one looks like what it actually is. Spaced out carefully enough that no single one looks like what it actually is. The consequence of my silence was more silence. The consequence of absorbing without objecting was that the absorption was expected, and eventually, the consequence of believing that love and self-erasure were the same thing was that I woke up one morning with $47 in an account that used to hold my future. What I've learned, what I'm still learning, honestly, because this isn't the kind of thing you figure out once and then you're done, is that integrity toward yourself is not selfishness. It is the baseline from which everything else becomes possible. I cannot be a good daughter, a good sister, a good nurse, a good anything if I am operating from a place of consistent depletion. You cannot give what you have already lost, and I had been losing slowly for a very long time. My father didn't know. I believe that completely. And watching him reckon with it in real time, his voice going quiet, then something in it breaking open, reminded me that honesty, even when it is late, even when it is painful, is still the only thing that moves anything forward. He didn't defend what happened. He didn't minimize it. He said I didn't know, and then he chose to know, and that choice cost him something too. That's what actual accountability looks like, and it is rarer than it should be. I still have the note I wrote to myself when my savings first hit $10,000. This is yours. You made this. Keep going. I wrote it to a younger version of me who was just starting to understand what it felt like to build something. I'm reading it now as someone who has had to learn, the hard way, what it means to protect it. The fund will come back. I'm 31, not done, and I know exactly how to save because I've done it before. But this time I'm doing it with my eyes open. This time I know what I'm protecting it from. And this time I know what I'm protecting it from. And this time, I'm keeping score.